Hello and welcome to the webinar, How to Boost Ad Revenue in Cookieless Environments. I'm your moderator, Calvin Sharps. As I'm sure many of you are aware, the loss of ad revenue and performance in a post-cookie world is a real risk. And I am sure that's why we have such great attendance on this topic. Today you will hear from two industry experts, Todd Parsons, Chief Product Officer at OpenX, a top independent advertising exchange focused on making the efficient people-based marketing buying experience of the walled gardens available across the open web, and Travis Klinger, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at LiveRamp, the identity platform leveraged by brands and their partners to deliver people-based marketing. We will record this session in case you want to revisit any of the content. And finally, we will answer your questions at the end of the presentation, so please utilize the Q&A feature in WebEx to type in your questions. I am pleased to welcome Todd and Travis.
So OpenX has been working on what we call Open Audience for the better part of a year now, and we're excited to share our solution for people-based marketing, as Calvin said. People-based marketing that works seamlessly across the open web. In these next three webinars. So I'm just going to quickly cover what they are, and then we'll move right into the content. This first webinar is really going to focus mainly on what we think the industry should be doing in a post-CCPA, post-GDPR, post-CCPA world, without the benefit of our, at times, beloved cookie, and in an environment where platforms are increasingly taking share of ad spend. So we're also going to introduce how identity, user context, and programmatic should and can work together to deliver a people-based marketing solution to help address these challenges. In the second webinar, so that's today, second webinar, we're going to go much deeper on the solution that OpenX and LiveRamp have partnered to deliver. We're going to look at a bunch of technical underpinnings for people who really are appreciating how things have to work for privacy, compliance, and actually simplicity and scale to all come together. And we believe, honestly, that by doing these things, that a Facebook-like buying experience is possible across the open web, and that if we're right, the industry, the programmatic industry, will quickly evolve towards solutions just like what we're going to present. The third webinar is going to focus on really what we've learned in the testing period of Open Audience, the good and the bad. We believe as companies, LiveRamp and OpenX, that transparency is something that a premium should be placed on. And we want to make sure that people understand that there's no silver bullet in the work that we're going to need to do to evolve our industry together. And we want to actually put our money where our mouth is by being very open about what we're learning. Okay, so let's go ahead forward with that in mind. Happy Privacy Day, Travis.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Happy Privacy Day. Thrilled to be here. Thank you for the invite and for hosting these webinars. From LiveRamp, we're super excited to be engaged in this topic. 2020 has been an exciting year. You know, I was waking up today and I was like, we're still in January. It feels like January has had a lot of exciting news. With, of course, the Google Chrome announcement, but some of the momentum that we've been seeing as well. I think today, Data Privacy Day, is a great opportunity for us all to remember what's most important in what we do. And at the end of the day, that's the consumer and the consumer experience, and really making sure that we're upholding the principles of privacy and data protection, giving consumers clear notice, clear choice, easy opt-outs, and making the web a better experience. And this is the decade that we can take all of the legacy ad tech ecosystem and all of the problems it had, and we can move beyond that, and we can give consumers full control of their data. We can give them an easier way to opt out, and we can show the consumer the benefit that we're creating for them. You know, marketing drives enormous benefits for the consumer. We have to always be putting privacy first and giving them optionality and control of their data. So we're super excited about this and really excited to be here on this webinar.
That's great, and it segues kind of perfectly into from a little bit of a happy place, which is all about safeguarding and being a steward of consumers, to the perfect storm, what I'm calling ad tech's perfect storm here, that we're being challenged by over the last 2-3 years. So if you can go to the next slide, you can see that I've kind of broken this down into three things: into privacy, into browser controls, and into platforms. So the message here is the last few years have culminated what looks like this perfect storm, in the programmatic space. Some are actually, the more dramatic folks are talking about the very survival of OpenRTB. And we wanted to kind of share with you what we hear in our position in the ecosystem as companies, what we're hearing most from our partners and our customers. So on the left-hand side here, I put a simple timeline together, which kind of combines privacy legislation and browser actions taken since, the advent of GDPR in 2018, all on behalf of consumer privacy. Let's just be optimistic that that's what's behind everything here. On the right, you have a histogram of how revenue has been shifting from programmatic to platforms over a slightly longer period, just to illustrate the point that money moving away from programmatic isn't all about consumer privacy legislation and the death of the cookie. So let's just quickly go through this and set the stage for the rest of the webinar. GDPR started off with a lot of anxiety, fairly little consumer interest, if I remember right, and there were a few big fines. So since then, the ICO Britain's office and other European enforcement agencies really have stepped up action in 2019. And what we're seeing here is that folks are paying a lot more attention these days because these actions are being enforced against smaller companies vigorously and more often. CCPA, on the other hand, is still in its very infancy, but it's interesting to note that, at least in the States, how it's shaping national privacy narrative and other proposed state legislation. So from our perspective, it's not hard to see a de facto standard emerging around CCPA. That is not a daring assertion. But with legislation, it can be reasoned that what's really changing is the standard of care where data relationships originate with consumers. Travis touched on this. For programmatic, we see these points of origination as OpenX with publishers being brands, primarily, then third-party data providers, and then browsers, which are a window to reaching consumers with any marketing or advertising. So it's worth noting that there are meaningful parallels to what we are seeing in today's programmatic world with regulated spaces. I worked in a prior life with Axiom and LiveRamp. We served a lot of financial services and healthcare companies that have been successfully navigating the problems we're looking at here on the screen and beyond for years. So I think we should be talking less about industry death and much more about industry evolution. So look, finishing off the timeline, this is the hot point of our webinar. Indeed, it's the theme. We are seeing how consumer privacy actions with browsers kind of emerge over this same period. So first ITP, then Firefox and Mozilla ETP, and finally the Google Chrome 80 release with same site and a lot of provocativeness about the privacy sandbox in the coming next 2 years. I think everyone on this call is painfully familiar with what's going on here, but the central point here is that browsing safeguards, with respect to data, its use and portability, and the delivery of advertising itself will require constant attention and iteration to keep our industry healthy. It's going to be a new normal for us in terms of the way we operate as partners and together if we're actually going to thrive as some of these more regulated industries have done well in the past. So all hope is not lost.
I think just to quickly add to your comment, Todd, I think one thing that's important is you all need to recognize this is a big deal. This is a fundamental change in how the ad tech ecosystem works. I've spent some of the past months visiting some publishers in Germany and having conversations where Firefox is a much larger browser than in most countries. And the effects have been significant. We're talking about 40% losses in publisher revenue in their Q4 area. With Google itself did a study that when there's not a cookie individual request, the average CPM drops by 50%. So this is a major change to how the ecosystem works, and we have to make changes. But it's also an incredible opportunity. So the walled gardens, at the end of the day, their growth is driven by their identity. The wall is largely built by identity and their addressability. And the open internet now has the opportunity to have that same capability. So even though this is a major change and presents risks for the ecosystem, I'm incredibly excited, and I think both of our companies are, about the opportunity here. We really have an opportunity here to bring the open internet to parity with the walled gardens.
I love the point, and we kind of needed the catalyst, Travis. If you look at the histogram on the right, basically you'll see, before we had the privacy dialogue, before in programmatic anyway, before we had the browser controls dialogue, you already had a flight of spend going to the walled gardens, or what I like to call the platforms, because they had a better marketing solution that had underpinnings of identity and was truly people-based. So I've been a partner to Facebook in a past life and other platforms. I can tell you it's a pretty tough competition between programmatic advertising and Facebook, though people fault Facebook for many things. So the idea that we do have an opportunity with change and the catalyst that we're talking about to now think differently about how we're doing business and really focus on marketer outcomes in a way that is not dissimilar to the walled gardens is a big deal. So let's quickly go through kind of the fundamentals that we look at on our solutions and just our philosophy. So first of all, and I'm going to rip through these. We can take your Q&A, and certainly this content will be available in some way, shape, or form after we're done today. Our first point is that we want to help publishers strengthen consumer relationships they already have. I think, and a lot of us at OpenX and LiveRamp think that publishers or brands have always been. They haven't always operated the same as a brand or a brand advertiser does. So, and programmatic and header bidding didn't exactly help that cause. So a big part of what we want to do in building solutions in partnership and as individual companies is to help enable the honoring of privacy and the seeking of permission. Permission that is very clear, permission that feels exactly like the permission that I give JP Morgan Chase, who has my banking relationship and my credit card. So that means that we have to build product with privacy first mandate in mind. When we build solutions like Open Audience and ATS, which is a big part of Open Audience, we have to provide publishers tools for data collection and management that are legit. And we have to partner with the right companies so that we know we have a cleaner privacy and data landscape. There are still people who are taking the easy way out and trying to kind of subvert some of the change in the environment. We don't want to be associated. The second thing, if you can move to the next slide, Calvin, is we have a very, very clear mandate to prevent publisher revenue loss. Okay, and this takes on a couple of very key points. I just gave you one: the help of collecting and managing publisher audience data, your customers' data, if you will. The second is making sure that that data is incredibly durable, meaning that it doesn't suffer the temporality of a third-party cookie or a first-party cookie with a time stamp on it. That we're able to re-identify users anonymously and privacy compliant way over term. And then the second piece of that, of course, is to make that identity incredibly portable across the ecosystem so that the scale of Google and Facebook and the other platforms can be touted in programmatic, unlike before. Next slide kind of brings it all home. We're going to talk a lot about true people-based marketing in the next couple of webinars. People have a perspective on what people-based marketing is. I think where the company is at today, OpenX and LiveRamp is pretty far ahead of where most folks are, thinking about identity, what does it mean to them, which solutions are the right ones to use. The way we look at equaling the walled gardens or the platforms and delivering true people-based marketing is that identity is a foundational piece of federating audiences across publishers that wish to cooperate with one another or operate independently. That a true people-based marketing solution must provide user permission capabilities and must integrate with any choice of user permissions that are deployed by publishing partners. And we work with about 2,500 here at OpenX currently. People-based marketing has got to provide user context and insights that make it possible for marketers to do better than endemically target or arbitrage using programmatic. We really want to provide deep knowledge and insights about users and make it possible in a completely kosher and legal way for that data to be used with permission. And then finally, this data has got to be a lot easier to activate. Activate in applications for delivery, activate in applications for measurement and attribution, and so on and so forth. That's been hard. Without these things all coming together, really the takeaway here is that we don't have true people-based marketing, and we're going to end up in a situation where we won't compete well with the platforms, and that revenue leakage from programmatic just may continue. Okay, so that's a summary. Next slide is going to get us right into our partnership, and we're going to talk a lot more about how our technologies are working together to deliver on the 4 points that I just touched on. So I think, Calvin, you can skip forward one more slide. Thank you. I think I've done my bit about people-based marketing. I want to give everyone on the call a little perspective about what tools and capabilities OpenX is bringing to the table in delivering true people-based marketing. We talked about our exchange, 2,500 publishers. A lot of those are the ComScore top 100, but we work down into many specialty publishers across web, mobile, and OTT, which are meaningful to marketers. We have built a matching technology, which is essentially a graph of graphs and provides third-party data to our publishers, which makes it possible for us to look at the world like Facebook looks at the world. Our exchange is covering 284 million total monthly active users. That's a very new stat for our company, which has been mostly cookie and device-based in the past, as most of programmatic has been. To each of those users, we are actually adding a lot of data in a permissioned way so that marketers might be able to build audiences that are very customized to them or that are prepackaged for a specific marketing goal. And of course, at the core of that graph, LiveRamp is our critical first partner, which Travis is going to talk about, the immense coverage LiveRamp has in after years of investment. The next point down is standardizing programmatic buying. Really difficult for folks to easily get to a Facebook-like buying experience in programmatic. We've worked hard to create that, including on the marketer side, the support of custom audiences and lookalikes, and on the publisher side, ways to package those audiences in deals that are easily targeted by any choice of DSP. We talked about powering permission. I'll zip right by that one. And we'll talk in a later slide about how we exchange the power of what these former points talk about on a page, in a session, in an app, in a way that is very similar to the delivery of Facebook advertising in the Facebook pixel. That covers OpenX and what we're leveraging. In the next slide here, you'll see on the right, we lean heavily into our partnership with LiveRamp and ATS to unlock identity in a cookieless world. So Travis is going to take us through the work that's done there and a huge part of what makes open audience possible.
Thank you, John. Yeah, and as you can see here in the next slide on the right, LiveRamp's role in the ecosystem is to better enable the connection of consumer with marketer. We believe, that marketers should be able to drive a meaningful consumer journey by connecting with the consumer through publisher relationships, regardless of the need of third-party cookies. And so how we build that? It all starts with our offline identity. So at the core of connecting the consumer with the marketer and connecting the consumer through the ad tech ecosystem, you have to ask, what is the anchor of your identity? So we hear a lot of talk now about, I have a third-party cookie solution, I have a first-party cookie solution. But what does that actually mean? What it means is how you anchor the identity. So how do you actually tie together a consumer's identity? For LiveRamp, that starts from the offline world. So we bring to bear our Abilitech graph, which is the largest deterministic offline identity graph there is, which connects together all of the different sources of a person. So you can imagine a person's name and postal address, their email address, their phone numbers. All of these are tied together in a deterministic manner to form their Abilitech ID. This is the core and the foundation of our identity. We then take the Abilitech ID and through a one-way process, we anonymize it and it becomes the identity link. And this anonymous identity link ID, which can never be connected back to a person's personal information, is then connected to the different digital identifiers that the person has. So you can imagine the person is browsing a website and might provide an email address. So we can connect that email address to the identity link. The person is using their connected TV device, so we can connect that to an identity link. So everything starts though at the core with the offline graph. What we've done with the cookieless world is we've developed our authenticated traffic solution. But what our authenticated traffic solution does is it leverages the Abilitech graph and a publisher's login event. So publishers actually have been collecting first-party identity for years. Every time you sign up for an email newsletter, every time you sign up to subscribe to a publisher's site, every time you sign up for a text alert, you as a consumer are sharing your identity in a trusted relationship with that publisher. And our authenticated traffic solution enables the publisher to connect that identity and match it to the LiveRamp graph. And then we send back our tokenized identity to the publisher in an anonymous form and then enable that user to be connected to the entire ad tech ecosystem without the need for a third-party cookie. So the way you can think of us doing this is that we have built a people-based infrastructure. So we connect cookieless browsers, cookieable browsers while they exist over the next couple of years, mobile and app, and connected TV. And we link this all to the identity link. So that what is anchoring our identity is this people-based ID. And then we have worked with our exchange partners such as OpenX and our demand-side partners to allow those partners to transact on this people-based ID. And then from a marketer perspective, you're able to buy, you're able to frequency cap, you're able to suppress, and you're able to measure on a people-based ID. And every impression bought is 100% measurable. And you're able to do all of this without the need for a third-party cookie because the anchor of the ID is the identity link, not a first-party cookie, not a third-party cookie. What's critical, though, is publisher first-party authentication. Ultimately, the walled gardens have mastered this. Every time I want to go on Instagram, I'm presented to share my identity. And I do it because I drive a meaningful connection with my friends on Instagram. I enjoy seeing the pictures and I enjoy browsing it while I'm waiting for my flight. And it's a valuable experience and I have no problem giving the email address. But the publishers on this call, all of you have amazing content as well. And all of you have an opportunity to have a conversation with the consumer about it costs money to build this content. Here's what we're sharing with you. Would you mind subscribing? Would you mind sharing your identity so that we can drive personalized ads? We know from studies that consumers prefer personalized ads. But what happened with ad tech is consumers didn't understand it, so they didn't share their identity. We now, with the end of the cookie, have this opportunity to have this dialogue with the consumer, to have this conversation and say, here's where you share your identity, here's how you do it. First-party authentication gives every publisher in the open internet the same wall that the walled gardens have. And the work that OpenX and LiveRamp have done have enabled the first-party data to then be connected through the ecosystem and to the hundreds of marketers that want to buy and transact on these IDs. There's a lot of ways to have this conversation. So we've been seeing over the past couple of years a rise of registration and paywalls. And LiveRamp actually announced in November, when we announced our LiveRamp for Publishers solution, that we would make a registration wall available at no cost to every publisher who deploys the authenticated traffic solution. This is paired with our LiveRamp Privacy Manager. I'm actually here in Amsterdam today in our LiveRamp Privacy Manager office, talking with folks about our registration wall and how we can roll this out. And you're going to hear a lot more about this in the next couple of months. But there's many ways for publishers to have this conversation with the consumer. But I think one takeaway every publisher should have is how you have that conversation, how you want to collect that first-party data, and then how you want to be able to leverage that first-party data through the ecosystem and connect with the marketers so that the marketers can drive a consumer journey. And Todd, do you want to walk us through the solution and how we'll deliver this?
Yeah, let's do that. The point that really resonates with me on the slide that you were just on, and it's important because we talk, with publishers and marketers almost every day, and there's a tremendous amount of confusion about identity and how it's deployed, and it's worth saying. Identity solutions that are tied to, that are essentially cookie syncs and partner syncs, are going to be really difficult to maintain as this industry changes. So that doesn't mean that we can magically flip over to an identity framework which includes all opt-in information from every publisher that makes the open web look like and feel like Facebook. That is something that takes measured work and effort and investment, as Travis just pointed out. But the main thing is there's a lot of talk right now about identity in general, and most of the solutions that we've been working on as an industry are tied to identifiers that are going away. So no easy way out, but we're offering what we think is a path, and certainly the underpinnings of a solution that will last for many, many years to come. So anyway, that was just want to put a fine point on that. In terms of solution delivery and what we're doing together, Calvin, if you just hit the next slide. Really, this is a pretty easy way to kind of break down the theme of this first webinar, just addressing post-GDPR, post-CCPA, and post-third-party cookie audience portability and scale is now a whole lot easier. We haven't solved all the problems, but joining our work streams has done a few important things. One is we've made it possible to leverage existing first-party data, approved and kosher third-party data for our publishers to start building their own audience networks. Okay. Again, whether they're doing them because they have massive scale by themselves and they want partners, or whether they want to participate in more of exchange-wide packaging of audiences, those are wide open things. And the reason we can do that is number two, removing the cookie reliance to support data portability across the publishing landscape. That's been a second part of our solution. It's got to work a lot like Facebook Audience Network and other platform audience networks work today. And then third, kind of just activating audiences into the scale of programmatic in a way that is a much more efficient thing. As a user of Facebook, as a marketer, I have always I've been trained on setting a daily budget, identifying an audience, uploading my data, building a prospecting pool from it, and setting a target cost and spending after I have my creative loaded. That is a very quick and easy process, which we are aiming to follow to the T. I'll break down each component a tiny bit more. So next slide will show us how it's a technology. We're going to expose some of this, I think, in the next webinar. We'll actually go through and show how a publisher can identify its audience, what we would say is an unknown audience, and to gain deep knowledge about users using the data stores that I just talked about in a first-party context. I'm not talking about targeting that comes from uploading third-party data files to a DSP and then comes through the bid stream. I'm talking about you, publisher, like you, brand, owning the first-party data and actually, with permission, enhancing the way that a marketer might go ahead and segment and reach that audience. So we'll go through some tools that we built for marketers and for publishers to kind of do the same thing. For publishers, it's getting known users understood and increasing demand, eCPMs, and revenue. And those are just some very early numbers. I expect better things as we go along. And for marketers, it's kind of matching, again, the feel of a Facebook-like experience. You shouldn't have to go through a 4 or 5 or 6 stage workflow to make programmatic work for you in a true people-based marketing approach if you have the right partners. Next slide is going to show you a little bit about how we are thinking about scale across publishers. We work with a lot of publishers, big and small, who say, I'd be happy to join my audience with partners if I had a way to do it that didn't leak my data, that I could control, I could opt into, I could join, I could get out of. I don't want to do a co-op, but I wouldn't mind, providing my credit card acquisition candidates in a pool with 15 other publishers so that Chase was able to hit its scale number that Facebook is happy to offer every day. So a big part of what we're doing here is we're packaging audiences in a way that is combining identity across participating publishers so that the advertiser, in the example I used, Chase, is able to pick and choose from people and then decide, do I want to reach that person on a household level with their OTT device? Do I want to reach that person a second time in mobile? Do I want to reach them on a desktop at work? And that's, again, an approach that is baked into the way that the platforms work, and Facebook set the standard for that to work. But it hasn't been the way that programmatic has worked in my past experience. And for publishers, we felt like it was very important to provide this capability. So it should be mentioned, we'll go into partner audiences, what we call partner audiences, in our next webinar in some detail. But these are combining, first and third party data and making it possible to get, for an advertiser like Chase, to get to scale very quickly across participating publishers. And so far, people have been pretty excited about the approach. So next slide this is really like in the weeds, and we hope to get a lot of feedback from people on the call. We're, at the end of the day, we think we need to stay out of the concept space and get into really attacking delivery once we have a privacy framework and we all agree we can be good stewards of the consumer experience and consumer data. Our way of delivering all the goodness of our match table and data and these audiences that I was speaking of in the prior slide, we call OAJS. This is a JavaScript library that we provide our publishers, install it. And in effect, what it's doing is a couple of really important things. One is it's enabling real-time identity resolution and enrichment of a user's context, a site user's context, in a way that is privacy compliant and sensitive to the opt-in that they have already made. So this is the connecting point, if you will, between publishers, LiveRamp's identity resolution backbone, and OpenX's open audience, what we are using to monetize. And it's really important. I mentioned earlier, to me, it feels a lot like the Facebook pixel. If you join the Facebook audience network as a publisher, first thing you do is you drop a pixel. Why? Because the same identity resolution is happening through it, and the same management of events for more effective marketing is made possible. That has not been the state of programmatic. The state of programmatic has been much more focused on header bidding and kind of gross monetization. Not a bad thing, but a thing that definitely we see the industry needing to evolve pretty quickly to get closer to the platform-like experience. So in our next webinar, and we're running along on this one, so I'm going to move beyond this slide. We will show you how OAJS is installed. and we will show you what the parameters are for reaching any of the resources that we talked through this webinar before this slide.
Thank you, Todd and Travis, for your insight. We do have a few questions that came in, and I'll go ahead and ask those. And we do apologize for going a little bit long. Again, this will be recorded, and we will send this out in a day or so. The first question, which is really good, is how long is the identity link data available? That's the first part of the question. And will we be able to know if that person has seen our ad before? Probably a two-part question, one probably for Todd and one for Travis.
Yeah, so maybe let me, I'll take a stab at that and then toss it over to Todd. So the identity link itself is a persistent people-based ID. So it's an anonymous ID ultimately based off the Abilitech ID. So the identity link itself does not change over time. So my identity link is the same today as it will be a month from now. When we embed the identity link envelope within the publisher's site through either the first-party cookie or through the CDN, we do put an expiry on that envelope of 30 days. So we don't want the envelope to last more than 30 days without the user re-authenticating. The reason the identity link is persistent ID is that allows us to then map it to a people-based opt-out. So if I went to liveramp.com/privacy and I decided to opt out, that's one ID. I am now opted out across the ecosystem, and every time I log in back with that ID, I will respect that opt-out. To the second question of can you see the ad that you've seen before? So every impression bought on Identity Link is measurable on Identity Link. So a marketer is able to pull the exposure logs of the Identity Link and see across the different publishers, the different ads that that person has been shown, as long as they were identified with that Identity Link.
Yeah, I would only add one thing to that, which is because of the way that we leverage Identity Link and other data sets, we're able to carry the persistency that Travis spoke of, as well as measurement across devices for an individual and indeed into their household, which is really important to marketers. Many marketers want to own the household, and the idea that we are able to not only persist the data for the period needed to do that, we have an underpinning to re-resolve a user over and over again without worrying about the temporality of a third-party cookie. We also are able then to watch that user's interaction on a variety of touch points, whether a mobile device or whether a set-top box, an OTT box at home, and deliver that kind of measurement to marketers who want it.
Great, thank you. Next question, how are the identity links being stored and tied to a person across different devices?
Great question. So it gets to what makes the identity link. So the identity link at its core is built off of the Abilitech ID. So we start with that PII. So for example, whether I log in to a publisher via my Mac that I have in front of me, or whether I do it via my phone, I'm submitting a piece of PII when I log into that publisher. So personal information, so a phone number or an email address. And all of those match back to that same identity link. So that's how we build the identity link as a cross-device ID. The identity link, when it's sent over to the publisher, is actually an envelope form, so a token, so that way it's privacy safe and can sit within the publisher's first-party cookie. And then when it's passed through the ecosystem, it is that people-based identity link. So regardless of whether a publisher sees the authentication on my Safari browser on my MacBook or my Safari browser on my iPad, two different devices, it's the same person, it's the same PII that's being resolved. And in fact, I might have multiple email addresses, but that's where the Abilitech graph comes in and saying these multiple email addresses are actually all the same person. So because our identity at its core is foundational on the Abilitech ID, we're able to link to different devices without using a third-party cookie.
Do you have any additional comments to that?
I guess I would just say on our side, a big part of the challenge is getting scale buying done against that ID. And I think it's in everyone's best interest on this call to get to that very quickly. So Everything that Travis said is spot on. What we're doing is making sure that buyers of advertising, marketers, have a really easy way to get scale audience buying done within that consent, that chain of permission, not consent, of explicit permission. What we do is we translate our buyers' IDs, and we work, of course, with all the notable DSPs into the combination of audience IDs, which come from the first-party cookie that embeds the LiveRamp IDL. So there's a bit of translation that's going on between when the permission is collected, how it is stored in the first-party context, and then how it is made available to a DSP which is targeting it. I mentioned before, to ease that process and make it really simple for buying to happen quickly and at scale, we package those audiences as deals, as audiences that are already interesting some 35 to marketers. And that's really sped the adoption process. And of course, we're looking to go faster with that. I can foresee a time when most of this is done in an audience sync across the ecosystem, but it'll take us some time to get there. And for now, we're seeing some nice demand come through by doing the translation I just spoke of.
That's great, thank you. I have one really quick question. Someone's asking if we'll be at IBALM, and the answer is yes. Both LiveRamp and OpenX will be attending that conference. And I think there's going to be a link sent to our events page in the chat window. Next question is this a similar product to CDP?
Oh, that is a fantastic question. Yeah, I mean, one of the inspirations of Open Audience was the disappointment I think that publishers in general have felt with their DMP investments, and the confusion around, okay, how am I going to get around this next wave of consumer data management or customer data management capabilities that a CDP would offer. Our goal wasn't to displace a CDP, but it was to provide enough functionality to a publisher that had scant technical and investment resources to chase another pipe dream. So we aren't offering fully featured CDP functionality, but we're doing a lot of the same things to identify and maintain identity and context on audiences, so a publisher can get to the monetization without having to necessarily make that larger investment. I'm not saying either or. I want to be very careful here. We're very friendly with a bunch of the providers in the data management space, and they do a lot more elegant things in personalization and so forth than we do. But when it comes to audience identification at scale, making it possible to customize and extend those audiences and bring the power of programmatic into the monetization framework, that's where this does start looking a lot like a CDP.
Great. I know we've gone extremely over on our time here. We have about 4 more questions. If folks want to stay on the line and get those answered, feel free to. And we'll just continue until we get to the top of the hour, because it seems like there's a lot of kind of interesting questions here. The next question I have is, how is DSAR being managed, and how is there an impact across the ecosystem?
Yeah, sorry, Calvin, do you mind repeating that? I missed the acronym there.
DSAR.
Data Subject Access Request. Yes, so I can't speak too much to it. I'm unfortunately not one of our privacy experts, but I do know that LiveRamp has a 4-star process that we rolled out as part of our CCPA. So we were planning for CCPA the moment that legislation happened, and making really big efforts to be fully compliant. So our privacy team was working throughout 2019 so that we were ready when CCPA went into effect, and we've actually already been working with a few of those requests here in the US. And then, of course, those requests have existed now for a couple of years in the EU since GDPR I can't speak to how exactly those are managed, but there is very much a process in place with ourselves and our partners for that.
Yeah, I mean, same is true for us. I'm starting with, respecting the IAB framework and DAA, but also making sure at the highest level that we are respecting any opt-out that occurs across the entire platform for open audience. That's a super key point. We don't feel comfortable that anyone should be sacrificing scale for privacy risk. We here in California, especially where the Attorney General is involved, I think should be super alive and awake on that point. So the way that we have looked at this situation is we want to make sure that we are taking extra safeguards for respecting opt-outs and fielding them. I should just say opt-outs do not sell, but also inquiries and deletes. And I think that was at the root of the question. But the main thing is, if anyone raises their hand and says no in any way, it's a blanket sort of rejection from the standpoint of open audience and the inclusion of that individual's ID in the match table that publishers use. Really important.
Great, thank you for those answers. Another quick question: is open audience available internationally or just in the U.S.?
Yeah, open audience is for now is a U.S. product. We're deeply looking at how to make the best parts of open audience work, handily and politely with GDPR. And of course, we're taking extra special care given some of the enforcement actions of late and kind of just the acceleration of how GDPR is being interpreted more strictly as it relates to companies like ours. So you'll hear from us a little bit more on our rollout strategy for EMEA this year. But we have definitely been playing to the more cautious side with open audience, and right now it's US only.
And then just to speak briefly on the LiveRamp side, so our identity link solution today is live in the US, Canada, the United Kingdom, France, Australia, and Japan. And we have aggressive international expansion plans this year. So I'm here in Amsterdam. This week, we'll be launching Germany this spring, the Netherlands, Italy, and Spain this fall. We'll be launching Singapore and Thailand in APAC. So we see Identity Link and ATS as key to our international rollout, and are really excited to bring this solution to a lot of new markets very quickly.
Great, thank you. Do you guys have time for 2 more questions?
We still have 8 minutes left. I would love to ask a question back, which is, does anyone want to meet and talk about this over dinner at ALM? That might be an irreverent view, but if you do, why don't you fire off an email to us or put yourself down in the thread, and if we get enough people, maybe we should just go talk about this in person. Go ahead with the 2 questions, though. 8 minutes is an eternity.
Okay, great. During the presentation, Todd, you kind of put together a summarization of how do publishers make revenue from this solution. Can you go into just a little bit more detail around that?
Yeah, sure. There are a couple of different ways, and I mean the theme for us has been just make it easy. I don't think anyone who's on the publishing side wants to wade through a sea of different solutions, now identity providers, and so on and so forth, and hope they made the right bet. And the way we built Open Audience is a reflection of that. So the first thing that we're doing that I think has maybe some of the greatest hope is we are packaging audiences in a way that advertisers already buy. We call them partner audiences. I talked about them a little bit before. there are some 35 universes of folks that buy durable goods during the holiday period, or are good candidates for mortgages, or are ready to test drive a car, or want to download an entertainment app. So we have just a few examples, real examples. We tried to be very much a slave to reason in building those audiences by examining how advertisers were using our exchange. We looked at how brands were buying, who they were targeting, and how that looked in relation to the 284 million monthly active users that we were able to produce. And we said, okay, this is where 90% of the dollars are. Let's start there. The reason that deals are important is because of just the ease of implementation. Every DSP is familiar with a deal. Every publisher is familiar with a deal. And we can roll much more easily with the infrastructure that Open Audience has, which includes all the goodness of LiveRamp. So that's the primary way we are out making it possible for active buying to come to publishers. And we'd like to think that we're probably saving our publishing partners a few dollars in investing in buying technology that we can actually provide for them as part of our existing relationship, which is pretty cool and always something to look for. And then obviously there's a passive component to this too, which is as we see more identities coming through, more IDLs, for instance, coming through the bid stream, and we know we can immediately attach those to an audience on one or more of our publishers, then we've seen lift in the cases where we get those matches. So as more people, it's classic adoption and network effect story. As more people use the right identity frameworks on both publisher and marketer side, we will all see the benefit. And it's going to take a little while to get there, but it is happening. So organically, great. We got an angle. We want to be super deliberate at OpenX. So we're packaging and making deals available to all of our DSP partners. And there will be more. That's our approach today.
Thank you. And one last question. We have about 3 minutes. Someone's asking, what do we specifically collect in that code in OpenAudience.js, and how long is that data stored?
Well, that's a great question. So we didn't go into much depth on OA.js. I would welcome that as something we should geek out on the next call if there's sufficient interest. Our JavaScript is basically giving publishers the ability, as I mentioned, to store a first-party cookie on a user, even if they're in an uncookiable environment. So we set that with OA.js, and it's capable of collecting other identifiers like, IP or page URL, the user agent, and so on and so forth. In addition to the opt-in information of an email, as we mentioned, that would come through anonymously through ATS. We store the data for 90 days, so it was a little bit longer currently than the treatment that Travis mentioned LiveRamp uses. But the sole reason for that is that's the speed at which we're rebuilding our user graph. So we think that there's probably going to be a shrinkage of that time frame down, but we wouldn't do it. There's a fair amount of cost associated with rebuilding this graph, and the idea that we would have to pass that along to our partners is not exciting to us. So we started with 90 days. We'll keep everyone informed as we do more of these webinars and have our product releases. Right now it's 90.
Great, thank you. Well, that takes us up to almost the top of the hour, and I've run out of questions. So we thank everybody for attending. Thank you, Travis, for attending kind of late night in Amsterdam. We appreciate it. Todd, attendance from California, and everybody that's joined us. Please be on the lookout for our next webinar in February. We're looking at the last week. We will be sending out some email invitations in the next week or so. Look for that. We appreciate everybody's time. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.